Dan.
I'm Roger.
Welcome back to Tracer Burnout. As you can plainly see, we have resolved our video issues that plagued us over the last couple of episodes.
Yeah.
So there's that. You get to see our bright, shiny heads and smiling faces once again.
Our beautiful punums.
Yes. Now, we haven't been complacent over the last few weeks. We've done a couple of other veteran podcasts. We were on the Vertical Momentum podcast with Richard Kaufman, and that was a longer form interview of the both of us going back into...
We were on the hot seats for that one.
Yes, going back into our childhood and talking about resiliency and things of that nature. And then we also went on with A.J. Cox and his whole crew over at the Lost Art podcast, which was another wide-ranging discussion, and we took questions from everybody.
Yeah, it was great. Great discussions. Go check them out. They're doing great stuff over there for veterans as well.
Yep.
Also, audio platform update. We're on all the podcast networks, as we've recently established, and we are officially international. So
yes.
We have listeners in Germany, Japan, and Russia. What this means is that the ghosts of Hitler, Tojo, and Lenin are all rolling in their graves, and we are perfectly fine with that.
Now, if we can get Mussolini to join the party.
Il Duce.
Yes.
Yes. So, Italy, we're watching you. Also, very topical, but recently, there are two retroactively awarded Medal of Honor recipients, Private Philip Shadrach and Private George Wilson, from Civil War era. They were Union soldiers. They were fighting alongside Private Samuel Robertson. If that name sounds familiar, he was one of our Medal of Honor Memorial Day weekend salutes that we did. They were part of the Great Locomotive Chase, a really great covert operation during the Civil War.
Yep.
They've been awarded the Medal of Honor all these years later, so it's a good thing that we're still keeping an eye on them.
So congratulations to their family. We're happy for them. We know that this was decades or more in the making, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. We can't take full credit for it, obviously.
I mean, that would be crazy.
But to say that we played no part in pushing this movement forward would just be a lie.
That's been in the work for over a century, and we'll take partial credit.
Yes, absolutely. Now, something else that we can take a little bit of credit for is Ariel Resupply Coffee.
Yes.
This is my freshly finished, I think 2 days ago I finished, Freedom Kitty, right? It is a flavored coffee. It's chocolate, cherry, amaretto, but it's a medium roast. So it was a nice balance of strength and flavor. We have talked before about how Ariel Resupply doesn't do gimmicks. Does having your child draw the picture?
It is a gray area, Dan. It is a gray area.
I don't necessarily think it's a gimmick, but it's a good way to get your child involved in the business.
Yes.
Or make them feel included, I guess.
Absolutely.
So anyway, it's good. And if you are interested in checking out some Ariel Resupply coffee, you can go directly over to their website and type in the promo code Tracer Burnout, and you'll get 10% off. Or you can go to tracerburnout.com. That's us. And there'll be an affiliate link right there on the website.
Yeah, it's in the banner right across the top.
Yeah. So one veteran-owned business supporting another veteran-owned business.
It's good stuff.
Yes.
We call that synergy in the biz.
Fancy words.
Yes. We introduce to you Mrs. Ivy Krueger. Stay tuned.
Enjoy. Hi, Ivy.
Sir. Hi.
Welcome to Tracer Burnout.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is pretty cool. Cool way to spend a Sunday.
There are worse ways to do
There
it.
There are.
Yeah.
Or I could be having a boozy brunch with my girls. But
and you sacrifice that to be
just
here
to
with
be,
us.
I could be anywhere in the world, but I
Us
chose
two
to be with you
knuckleheads.
guys.
Well, that makes us feel very special. So
We are honored.
Yes, and you and I did serve together. So,
so there's that. So I owed you one.
Okay, perfect.
For keeping me alive.
I would argue that if you served with Roger, he owes you.
That's a fact, and here I am.
I agree with Dan on this measure. Yes.
I appreciate it all the same.
So perfect. So you are our first female veteran that we've had on the show.
Nice.
So welcome.
I'm a first for a lot of people. So
Okay.
Perfect.
I suppose there's many different ways to take that.
let me explain. Let's
Do
see. No, when I got to civil affairs, I was their first female NCO team leader. So for 97th. I guess there was one before me.
Okay.
And
What year was that?
2007, 2008, yeah.
Okay.
And then my friend Yvette, she and I were in PSYOP together, and she came over to civil affairs, so she was the second.
I know her as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, well, let's not jump too far ahead of
Yes.
the future.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Let's go
or
back.
the past.
Well, yeah. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Does your family have a history of service?
So my grandfather served maybe 4 years. He was in the Korean War, and then I had an uncle that, man, he was 82nd through and through. He was in Desert Storm. Every time he came back from leave or on leave, or he was TDY in the area, he would teach me how to do push-ups. I think it was just destiny,
As one does.
I was so infatuated with his lifestyle because, I don't know, my grandfather got me, you remember back in the day, they used to have these like National Geographic magazines from all these different, yeah. So he, every once in a while, he'd get me like 3 or 4 of these that he'd get from like, people recycling or something like that, and I would just devour them. I'm like, man, I want to travel the world. Yeah. So when my uncle would come home from leave, he would tell me about being in Kuwait or being in Germany, and I'm like, I want to do that when I grow up.
Were these the box sets that you could put on the
yes,
bookshelf where they would slide in?
Yeah. And then they used to have series, so like the back cover would be like a, some sort of animal or some other scene, but yeah, so I kind of fell in love with the idea of traveling the world, and I guess that's how it ended up being. One of my really good friends when I was in high school, her aunt was a captain and her uncle was a warrant officer, and she lived with him, and I was like, I would just devour all the things, and I'm like, I'm going to do that when I grow up. But so, not really. But
where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Oklahoma, in central Oklahoma, but my family on my dad's side is from Ghana, and then on my mother's side they lived in Oklahoma. Okay. So I have a duality of culture.
Oh, very cool.
So, but yeah, I just like about a year after I started college, I joined the military. Me and my ex-husband.
So you graduate from high school and you go to college first.
Yeah, I went to college for a year, and then I realized that this is a very expensive endeavor if you're doing it alone. So me and my husband at the time, we joined the military in a buddy program system, and so my first job, I was a geospatial imagery analyst. I think back in the day they were called terrain analyst or something,
which is part of the
engineer
course.
Yep. And then I got to AIT, and they're like, oh, you got to have a clearance before you get out. So they're like, you can swap in what, because like the terrain analysts had to have a top secret when they got out. The surveyors and the lithographers or cartographers, they only had to have a secret. So they're like, you can just reclass and go. You've already done the training. So I ended up going to the cartography school up in Washington, D.C. for like 9 months or something.
That was before or after basic?
That was after basic.
So we'll cover basic here in a minute. So year of college, not for you. You and your, at the time, husband enlist. So y'all go to basic training at
Fort Jackson.
Fort Jackson. So not Leonard Wood.
Jackson,
okay.
No.
Okay.
No. So yeah, I don't know when I think they started that a couple years after I had enlisted, because a lot of my soldiers were going to Fort Leonard Wood or came from Fort Leonard Wood when I was in the engineers.
Since you guys came in together, you and your ex-husband, did you guys end up going to the same basic training unit?
It was weird. So our MOS was twice a year. And when we went to basic training, the next class was about to start before we graduated. So I went first, and they kind of like rushed me through. So I got about 6 weeks of basic training because I had to start early. So we didn't finish together.
Oh, wow.
And then I went to DC, and then he came shortly after. He came like 2 months after I had been there. So I didn't get the full experience of basic training.
Oh.
Yeah. It was hard. I think it was prepping me for my next MOS when I was in civil affairs and went to SEER school.
Oh, yeah, SEER school.
Yeah, because we did all the things so quickly.
So you finish up your I guess, would that be part of your AIT officially? So we'll say your advanced individual training, you wrap that up. So you've now finished the beginning part of that. Dan, do you have any questions about basic in and of itself? I know, but I don't want to give you short shrift on this.
No, I mean, you only only had 6 weeks. That's very brief.
Yeah, so me
unheard
and...
of
You've
brief.
upset Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, me and my battle buddy, I will never forget her until the day I die, because we both had the same first initial. So, I mean, she was the absolute worst. And great gal, but she was just... You know how, small task. You grab the road guard vest, right? And it's hung up by your lockers, so you don't have to miss. And she'd run downstairs, be the last one to get to formation, and she forgets the one thing that she's in charge of.
Yeah.
Which, of course, then she has to go back for while the rest of you are in the front letting rest.
Exactly. And it was me and Megan all day, every day. And I was just like, I got to get rid of her. I have to. I can't. I said, I can't imagine being paired with somebody that is so... She's a great person. I mean, she really is. I love her dearly. But those first... I mean, we were young kids. And, I came from a very, very strict household. Like, the military did not faze me at all. Like, basic training, oh, you want to buff floors? Well, my grandparents own a cleaning service. I knew how to buff floors when I was like 6. So it's not that big of a deal for them to like punish me with like laborious tasks or whatever. But my battle buddy, she didn't know how to sweep, she didn't know how to mop, all those tasks that I thought people normally knew how to do. I was like, oh, this is going to be a problem.
Yes. Basic training tends to be a grab bag of all sorts of experiences.
And she and I were the only two that got pushed forward because she and I had the same MOS too. And I was like, oh no, we have the same last name, beginning, like first initial or initial in our last name. And now we're going to AIT together. And she was my battle buddy in AIT. And it was just like, then I had 9 months of that versus 6 weeks. It was like 9-10 months of it. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know.
Well, I mean, things had to have changed as far as the disciplinary standards and whatnot from basic training into AIT.
I mean, they actually got a little looser.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're supposed to.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like you would expect with like a relaxation in your rules that you'd be a little bit more, I guess. I don't know. It just seemed like you'd be a little bit more mature and you'd be able to handle the added responsibility given back to you.
One would think.
You would think so.
I know. And I don't mean to beat on her, but I just remembered like that's like a core memory that I can't ever shake. I was like, I remember just like if this is going to be what the military's like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to do my 4 years. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
And lucky for me, by the time I got to AIT, I was almost done. I had like almost 2 years by the time I got to my first duty station. So
that's a lot of training.
How long was your initial enlistment?
So 4 years.
4 years.
And I spent half of that in training.
Yeah.
And so I left, ironically, here we go again with the same battle buddy. So she opted to go to airborne school and I wanted to wait for my husband. So I was like, is there any way that I can choose an assignment that we both can get and I can be a holdover or whatever? And they're like, yeah, sure. So they were going to send me to Korea and I'm like, I don't want to do that because I don't know if he'll get sent right away. So they're like, well, we've got a spot for you in Hawaii. So I was like, I'll take it.
It's hard to say no to that.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't think that's a good. If you're going to Schofield Barracks, maybe. But if you're going to like, Fort Shafter or Hickam, I don't think that's a good duty station for first term. I know why they do it though, because you've already romanced me, man. Like you've taken me to Hawaii. Like not a lot of people get to do that.
It's like dating. Right?
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, let's take you back to AIT when you're actually learning your job. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what were you doing? What was the training that was preparing you for your specialty? So,
man, I always find like the irony in life, right? So in my high school yearbook, you put what you're going to be when you grow up, or whatever your quote was, and mine said, I want to become a famous photographer and travel the world. So with that being said, we took satellite imagery and we turned it into maps. And then we would go into dark rooms and we would develop the film. We would scribe the roads and we would go through press operations from the beginning to the very end. So most of what we learned, I guess, is what graphic illustrators do now. We learned a lot of different type of it's been so long, man. That was like years ago. So I remember it was a lot of old school dark room operations, and a lot. I never failed land nav. I never failed land nav because you have to know every single terrain feature in every country. I mean, it was pretty extensive, but it was cool because it was in DC, so we got to see a lot of the nation's capital, and we got to hobnob with a lot of important people, so it was pretty neat. But
name one important person you got to hobnob with.
Sergeant Major of the Army Tilly. So
that counts.
She's
got you there.
That does count. No, I'm asking for an example.
I have a coin from him from. I actually have 2 coins because I met him once when we were in DC, and the second time he came to Hawaii, and he's like, he was asking the first sergeant, like, give me your PT stud, because he was known for his 1-arm push-ups. Mm-hmm. And we were out at some theater, and everybody's like, oh, Abby, you should go up there. And I'm like, I'm not going up there. And then here comes my first sergeant. She's like, get up. Get on stage. And I'm like, man, come on. I've never even attempted a 1-arm push-up before, but I got 2 out and I got a coin out of it. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah. Pretty sure I had a little assistance. It felt like somebody was pulling on the back of my shirt, helping me up off the ground. So,
gotcha.
But it was fun.
Well, we don't want to date you too much. However, because of all of us are roughly the same age, 9/11. In relation to you joining up, you being in training, where is 9/11 in this? Was that before, after?
Months. Literally, I get to my first duty station. My husband's still in DC, and I will never forget, on September 10th, I'm in Hawaii, and my really good friend, his birthday was September 11th, and we were having dinner. So we're in Hawaii, so we're, I think at the time we were like 4 or 5 hours behind, and the clock changed, and he's like, hey, it's my birthday, and it's 9/11. I was like, yeah, that's cool. So my sister, one of my older sisters, were getting married on September 11th. So I was scheduled to leave that evening afterwards and take a red-eye flight to her wedding. And I get to the airport, and all of the things were canceled. Now this is 4 o'clock in the morning, so I'm like,
so you've been in a black hole. You don't.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on. So one of my friends from home called, my phone's going off, and I'm like, what's going on? And then I see MPs pull up to the airport, and they're on a these megaphones. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, if you're at Fort Shafter, if you're stationed at Fort Shafter, you're active duty, you need to get on these LMTVs. And my phone's ringing, and I'm like, what's going on? So as we're leaving, they have the TVs in the airport, and I was like, oh, they're New York Under Attack. So I'm thinking it's a movie like Die Hard or something like that, because that doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't even look real.
Yeah. So I get back to our barracks at Fort Shafter, and I'm like, let me see why she's calling me for. And then I noticed that the gate was closed. The gates never close. People can drive on and off this installation all the time. And I was like, well, why is the gate closed? I've never seen that. I've been here for, I think at the time I'd probably been there for 2 months, and I had never seen that. But yeah, I pick up the phone, and my friend's like, you're going to war. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? She's like, turn the TV on, right now. So I turned the TV on, and that's when the second tower had gotten hit. And I was like, where is that at? And they're like, it's in New York. Somebody is attacking New York. And I'm like, this can't be real. This, I think it was a very surreal moment because I remember just kind of talking to my uncle and about, his time in the military and when he got sent to Kuwait for Desert Storm. And he's like, but you guys live in you're joining the military during a great time. There's not a lot going on. You're going to breeze through those 4 years. Everything's going to be fine. And 2 months after I graduated AIT, they were like, guess what? Put on your gear. You're going to JRTC because y'all are going to war. I'm like, gosh, this is going to be great. In all the ways, right? Because, there's something that people don't really think about when they join the military. I don't really think when you're not infantry or some sort of combat arms. When you're doing support, I don't think people really consider themselves dying for their country, right?
Yeah.
They know they're sacrificing moments and memories that you would have if you had gone straight through college and did all these things, or if you got married, had children, got a job. But like, you're putting that part of your life on hold so you can fight for your country, and you get kind of stuck in this like bubble, right? It's like time stands still. So when you are told that you have to go and support a combat unit or something like that, even then you don't think that you're going to be a victim, or, you know what I mean? Like, I'll just say for me, I won't speak for everyone, but I don't think that kind of registers in your mind.
The possibility of being a casualty.
Right, yeah. It just seems like that's such a far thing from your mind. You're like, no, I'm not going out there toting a gun, and that's for the infantry guys, that's for those that. But the reality is like, that is literally everybody, and you are expected to do your part. And it's pretty terrifying as a 19-year-old getting on a bird, going to a country. Some of us have never left the country before, never left their home before. It was a pretty terrifying experience. But yeah, that's how 9/11 happened. And my husband was in DC, and like, there was no way to get in touch with anybody.
Right.
So it was a pretty, it took like several days for us to find out if even, because like where the AIT was, it's a stone's throw away from like the Pentagon. So we had no idea like if anybody was like hurt, or like why there wasn't any communication. But we finally got in touch with each other about 2 days later, and I was like, well, this is what we signed up for.
Got real
real quick. And it's fortunate because sometimes there has to be something that forces you to grow up, right? You think that basic training will do it. Nah, that's why they have squad leaders and sergeants and LTs to kind of keep you going. Some people get married, have children. You think that'll help them grow up. But this, when your mortality is in your face, that grows you up really quick.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
So y'all head out to JRTC, which is down in Louisiana. It's the Joint Readiness Training Center. So they're attempting to, it's a little bit canned as far as the scenario is concerned, but this is breaking new ground when you're doing a JRTC rotation immediately after 9/11. There's more unknowns than knowns at this point.
Right.
So what was that like as far as experiencing it?
I will be completely honest with you and tell you that I was miserable and depressed and terrified. And I only say that for this reason. I wasn't with an active duty unit. I was with a reserve unit. I was with the Snowhawk Brigade out in Fort Wainwright, Alaska. That's the unit they attached me to. And these guys came off of regular jobs. And I was like, oh no, like, we're all learning this together. And they're like 30, 40-year-old men. And I was like, oh no, like, what do you mean you were like a principal like 2 weeks ago? So that, I didn't have a full understanding of like, drill and the things that they do, because I'm active duty. So I'm like, this is my everyday job. So yeah, I know how to fire, I know how to shoot, move, communicate. But when you're teaching somebody that you can actually see as your father, that was pretty terrifying for me. And I'm like, oh man, we gotta get on it, And every day I was like, I'm reading every single piece of material there is to know about everything. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know who I'm going to end up with, but I'm reading like the little green book, the little blue book, the little black book, anything I could get my hands on. But at the last minute, my first sergeant calls me and she was like, I think you need to go on leave first and then come to Hawaii. Take your leave in Hawaii before you guys ship out. And then you can ship out with them a little bit later. So I was like, all right, cool. But they didn't wait for me. They left. So I was like, missed that one. And
that was in 2002?
No, that was, it was late. Like, actually, it was like a year later, actually. Yeah. It was
the unit deployed.
The unit deployed. Yeah. It was almost to the date a year later. But then I ended up getting sent to Fort Bragg. So I was like, man, kind of missed that first one. So I think my mind was like, wars don't last that long. So maybe by the time I get to my next duty station,
if you only knew,
20 years later,
the long war.
Yeah. So, mentally I wasn't in the place of thinking that I was going to get another opportunity to go serve my country in a different capacity.
So Fort Bragg, you volunteer for this.
Now I got selected.
So you have to go to airborne school en
Yep.
route to Fort Bragg. So tell us about airborne school.
I mean, what is there to say? So in walks in that main character, my battle buddy from basic training.
Oh, man.
Seriously?
I'm not
This
even
sounds like
kidding
a
you.
movie.
I am not even kidding you. I swear, I was just like, oh, yay. What are the chances that we both end up in the same PSYOP unit in the same squad and we're going to airborne school at the same time? They're like, you guys are going to drive down there together. And I was like, all right, great.
Goody.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. So they're like, yeah, they're the ones from Fort Bragg. You know how they're like, don't wear any patches or anything like that. So I'm like, whatever. But yeah, we get to basic training and she's like, Ivy, we can quit together. Like, we can leave at the same time. I'm like, it's day 2.
It's a little soon for that.
Yeah, let's just try to, and maybe it's all the running and falling off of stuff, but she was just, oh my gosh, she was such a delicate flower. I just didn't feel like this life was for her, and I mean, after the first couple days, you don't even realize how much you put your body through until like that delayed like pain comes. So by the 3rd day, I physically couldn't walk. I was like, I just can't. And I remember calling my squad leader and I was like, hey, Sergeant, I just don't know if I can finish this. I mean, my body hurts. I'm in peak condition. And I'm like, I don't even think I can finish this. Like, parts of my body that I didn't even know that I had was hurting. And Megan's like, let's go. Let's go. And I said, I don't think we can do it, man. I said, let's just try to get through this week.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. And then we made it all the way through. And then I will never forget the first mid-air collision that I had, and it was at basic training, and I was like, it had to be me. But our guest speaker, I can't remember his name for anything, but yeah, so we were jumping at night, and I checking my canopy, and at night you can't really tell how fast you're falling. I don't know why it seems like it's so much faster, but you're probably the air's a little bit thinner, so maybe. But I saw the pitter-patter feet going across the top of my canopy, and I was like,
tell me it was your battle buddy.
Oh gosh. Could you imagine? Oh geez, that would have been the worst. But I saw these feet and I was like, oh no. So I'm pulling slips. So there you go. Yep. That's how old I am.
Oh yeah.
I'm pulling slips. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, and there's no steering. That's just confidence. That's all that is. You're not steering anything.
Not much.
I mean, small increments, right?
Yeah.
So you're just like, whatever. But so I thought I had successfully turned away from the threat, and then I saw boots coming toward my face. It knocked my helmet off my head. His legs were tangled up on my shoulders, so I'm trying to like get his feet from out of the
your suspension lines.
Yeah, the suspension lines, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how far. Then I start hearing thuds, so I know that equipment's falling, people are falling, and I'm like,
you got about
no,
2 seconds
before I hit the ground. Yeah. So I was like, how they like grab the opposite person and then try to. As soon as I reached for his shoulder, we did hit the ground. And I don't know why I saw stars. I think it was a TBI, but I could have just been looking up because it was night. It was night. But his moans is what made me know that there was something terrible that just happened. And it was our last jump. And I was like, all right, Ivy, if you can get up and walk away, you're good. And I got up and my knees buckled and I was like, oh man, maybe it's just the adrenaline from, just crash landing into the ground. But the guy that I had tangled up with, like, I knew there was something bad going on with him because the way that he was moaning, I'm like, something has to be broken. So I popped my chem light, and then jump masters and safeties come out there and they call the medevac
the
van,
FLA.
yeah, and they take him off and they're like, you good? I said, yeah, which way do I go? They're like, follow the strobe light. And I ran back out there and I was like, man. So the medic's looking me over and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And I thought it was sweat, but it was blood. I had blood on my face from like popping my nose. But
and you said your helmet was missing.
Yeah, I didn't even graduate with a helmet. This is
wow.
It's probably the precursor.
That's why
to our
soldiers like to loot landing zones.
Yeah, exactly. All the goodies: wallets, watches, phones,
Gerbers.
Yeah, Gerbers, you name it, you can find it. But yeah, and then so the next day they're like, hey, you're good. You've completed your jump. You don't care how you landed. You got out of the plane.
All you have to do is survive your 5th jump.
Yeah, and we had our graduation, and the guy that crash landed with me, he's on crutches, and we're listening to the guest speaker, and he's like describing, he's been in the military for a number of decades now, and he's like, you have your kids that come in behind you, and he's like, the worst feeling in the world is getting a call in the middle of the night, because you're here, you don't know where your children are. Mm-hmm. So, my son's in the military. He's going through, I forget what they call infantry guys when they do infantry and AIT.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So he's like, I wake up and they're like, your son's been in a training accident. And like everybody's kind of not knowing where this story is going. And he's like, but, I'm really glad to be standing here today to pin his airborne rings on him. So the guy's standing next to me. And I was like, oh, that's your dad? I think he's like a 1-star or something.
Oh, nice.
And so he comes down the line and he pins his son, he hugs him, and then he turns to me and he's like, thank you for saving my son's life. And I'm like, you realize he was the problem, right? He almost took my life.
Just not politely. Yes.
But I was like, yeah, I guess, like popping a chem light and bringing the medics over. But yeah,
that's cool. A truncated 9-line.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, he gave me a coin and gave me a hug, and I was like, cool. Your son almost killed me.
Your son's the sky shark.
Yeah. I was like, he almost killed me, but it's all good. It was cool. But yeah, that was basic training. And then me and my battle buddy drove back to Fort Bragg with our wings shining and feeling great.
So you report into Fort Bragg where?
So I was in 3rd SIOP Battalion.
Okay, so that's in USASOC.
Yeah, so yeah.
U.S. Army Special Operations Command.
I don't know, they've changed. They were 45th something before.
Okay.
Thing so many times. I have no idea what it is now.
Okay.
Something MISO, something, I don't know.
Yeah, somebody somewhere has to validate their OER, so they change the name of something.
Yeah,
there you go.
just like the berets and all that kind of stuff.
Well, on the active side, there's still POG PSYOP groups, so that's remained the same. So.
Yeah, when I was there wasn't 2 brigades, there was just 1.
Yep. So. Yeah. So you were a geospatial
I didn't
specialist?
do that.
I'm sorry, geospatial.
Geospatial imagery analyst.
Imagery analyst, thank you.
Yeah.
And you report into a PSYOP group. So you are now on airborne status. You are at the center of the universe. Fort Bragg, which will always be Fort Bragg.
Always. Let's stand together on that, guys.
Yes. Yes.
Stand together.
Yes. And it's relatively recently after 9/11.
Yeah.
So you are now in a special operations unit. Yeah. What happens next?
I was there for 2 months, and then they were like, guess what? That deployment that you missed, right on the corner. So I got deployed like 2 months after I was there.
To Afghanistan?
No,
Iraq would have just kicked off.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they took us to Kuwait, and then from Kuwait we went to Qatar, and we operated in Qatar under CIFSOC. And then they would send us out 30 days at a time with I guess back then we were like PSYOP teams or MISO teams. So we get attached to a MISO team, go to like Al-Assad or something like that, and then come back. And so we were just in and out that way. But yeah, I did that. So it was fun because I was like, oh, this is going to be like 6 months. And 6 months turned into 9 months. 9 months turned into 12 months. I'm like, are we ever going home?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize that was when people's deployments were getting extended to 15 months. And I was like...
That was starting in about 03, 04 is when that really started. Yeah.
So you were in Qatar the whole time?
Yeah. Well, not the whole time. So I went to Al-Assad, came back. Went to Al-Assad, came back. So yes, the whole time I was in Qatar, but we were just going in and out.
Well, yeah, you did your short little trips in and out. But
we were in Qatar, and I did that 2 times, and then...
What were you doing there?
So, well, I had already made E5, so I wasn't doing anything.
Is that how that works?
I had minions. No, I'm kidding. So our team, we were doing the leaflet bombs and the handbills.
Oh, the Hearts and Minds?
The Hearts and Minds. Telling you, there's such a parallel, I think this journey to civil affairs was going to happen regardless, right? Because
it's foreshadowing. Remember, it's a movie, right?
Yeah, all these little nuggets that are hidden in the background. But so we were making. You remember the cards, the little deck of cards? With all the bad guys?
Ace of Spades. Yeah,
that was us. We made those. So I went from making maps to making whatever you want to call that.
So you just watched as your minions were around the laminator? Is that really what happened?
Basically. No, so we had a print shop, we had a graphics department, we had a graphics team, so we would do I guess we call storyboards different now, but back then you put a storyboard together like your little campaign, and then we'd take it over to the graphic guys, they'd make an illustration for it, then we'd take it to the print guys, and then they would print it up, cut it up, pack it in these little inverted boxes that had static lines attached to them, and then go down to Asalea and put them on a C-17 and go litter the landfill.
Drop them out of the back of a big, either
back of a big
Herc or a Glowmaster.
Yeah. So at first they were using like actual like
Pallets?
no, the actual bombs, like they were cleared out, like, but they would pack.
It's inert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they were like, hey, that's scary for people to see.
It looks terrible.
Yeah. So then they were like, let's try something else. And they did the boxes that would explode or implode.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a bomb lands in the middle of the village and it just says, open me for information on the side.
So, as the resident civil affairs professional, I would advise the commander against dropping inert bombs.
We didn't have any civil affairs at the time to tell us not to do that.
Good gracious.
Yeah,
okay.
So they were probably doing some other things elsewhere, but yeah, our teams were out there. And then I got an opportunity to actually like work with a PSYOP team, and I was so excited. And we have this building, it's called the MOC, it's the Media Operations Center over there by the old Greenberry Club.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, me and my friend, we were at the I don't even know if there's like a very edge of the wire, but they had trailers out there, and they were like, hey, someone's going to come and check on you guys like every half hour or so, make sure that, you radio in because you were out here by yourself and the wire is like right there. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. And so I'm like, hey, so what do we do? And they're like, so we're in charge of changing the station. It's like, the station for what? He's like, yeah, so like AFN, like there's only a certain amount of channels that people can get. So the channels that they get in the States, we can control here. So the guys will be like, hey, can you turn it to, I guess a football game that's playing on ESPN? So we changed the station. And I'm like, this can't be what I am here to do. They're like, it's like CQ duty.
I spent 2 years in training.
Yeah.
To
change
channels.
channels.
To change a channel.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, those football games are really important to people.
They're morale builders, right?
Yes.
They're morale builders.
It's pretty important.
Yes.
I grew up watching AFN in West Germany.
Oh, yes. That was a thing.
Yeah. So, so I mean, it was fun. I just thought that I was going to, in my mind, like you get a little bit of training with each of, this is the one thing I will say that I did enjoy about working in a support MOS like that, because one of our sergeant majors was like, you don't know who you're going to deploy with. So you're going to spend 90 days in each of the platoons and learn their job. So you would learn
cross-training?
Yeah. So, you'd learn what the surveyors were doing. You'd learn what the cartographers were doing. You'd learn what the train analysts were doing. So it was kind of similar when I was in PSYOP. My first sergeant was like, you guys are going to learn the professions of the people that are around you, because if something happens, somebody's got to know what to do next, We
don't have the luxury of numbers and...
Right.
That's good leadership.
Yeah. At a very, very, very young, I wouldn't say age, but a young time in my military career, I had some really great leaders that just taught me some really important things that came into fruition a lot later. Even though you don't always have it at the front of your mind, something will trigger it and you're like, oh.
It's there.
There it is.
Now, you had talked about when you were at JRTC, because of the unit that you were attached to, you were diving into a lot of information, trying to absorb as much as possible. Were you still doing that at this point?
Well, yeah, because...
Or because you were away from that unit, you were like, I can slow this down.
Because everywhere you go, you got to learn something new, right? So I've always been of the mindset, and maybe it's because, like, my grandfather instilled this in me, and my father instilled this in me. It's like, you're not going to get a fair shake for a lot of reasons. It is not always going to be your fault. So you have to make sure that it's not like a no fault kind of thing, right? No fault through my own. I tried, right? So I always try to learn about the people I'm with, the jobs that they do, and what makes it important to them, right? Because people want to teach, and they want to, I would say in general, people want you to learn and want you to understand the things that make them tick and the things that make them happy in their world. So I've always tried to do my best to learn about the things that I'm doing. So when I found out I was going to a PSYOP unit, I'm like, which PSYOP unit am I going to? Oh, this is what these guys do. I'm like, all right, so basically you have an engineer unit inside of a PSYOP battalion. Got it. But we're going to be attached to PSYOP teams. So the PSYOP team that I was attached to, I try to learn their job.
Be an information sponge.
Yeah. And then I was like a little board nerd too. So I always, I was going to every single board there was ever, and it was what I was good at. So I was like, I'm going to be a board soldier. So that's what I did. And that's why I guess I've always been one of those people that just like to learn things. I'm like on my 5th round of college degrees at this point.
I mean, if you're not learning or, if you're not growing, then you're dying, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So you returned from the Middle East after that particular mission back to Fort Bragg.
A year. You had been deployed for a year by the time you came back.
Which went from 6 to 9 to 12 months, just like nothing.
As it does.
As it does.
Come back to Fort Bragg. What happens next? So this is 04, 05?
Yeah, so I end up leaving right again. I was only back for maybe like 2 or 3 months, and then I actually got selected to go to drill sergeant school. But I was on orders already to leave. So they were like, do you want to, defer your orders until you get back? And I'm like, if you can guarantee me 6 months. Because last time you guys said that, I was there for a year. But then when I came back, I got an assignment over at JSOC. And that was my first experience with civil affairs.
The Joint Special Operations Command.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask, what year is this?
This is 2007.
So that's important because this is around the time that psychological operations and civil affairs become active duty.
Yep.
They break off from what we call USACPOC, which is the reserve portions of both of those regiments, which is about 90% of the force. So there's a new active duty civil affairs and PSYOP.
Right.
So, and you choose.
Yeah. So
to join them.
So I was attached to 96th.
Okay. Which is all there was back then.
Yeah. I was in Alpha Company. And then I got sent to JSOC. Those guys are wild. I love them.
They are indeed.
But yeah, so I got my first taste of civil affairs because they were like, it was, when was Hurricane Katrina? 2007, 2006?
It was in 05 because it was when I was in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So, Central America was pretty devastated as well. So like Honduras and a lot of those places. So that's where I got sent. And they were like, hey, this is what we're going to do. These guys don't even look like military guys. Like, I didn't even know. I was like, they'd like, hey,
beards and flannels.
Yeah, I was like, I've never seen that side of the military before. But they were like, hey, we're gonna go and talk to some of these village leaders and kind of get an idea of where they're at in recovery, and then we're gonna try to find opportunities to help them. So I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, what do you want me to do? And they're like, well, you just need a female with us. So I was like, right. So it was me and like 2 other females. They actually had skill sets. One was a mechanic and the other one was like a medic. And
is that Solsi?
Who?
The logistics element, support element there in the gym.
Oh, I don't remember.
It may well have been. Was JTF? I'm going to get fact check on this. Was JTF Bravo around that time frame? You would have been supporting them if they existed, which sounds like they probably didn't. So
no.
Okay.
We just got debriefed
Gotcha. Okay.
a couple of years ago. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So a couple of us. Yeah. It was just me and there was 2 other females. One was a medic. One was a mechanic. And so like they actually had real jobs. Because I'm like, what am I gonna do?
So I mean, you were just along for the ride.
Well, I mean, so, there's not a lot of it I can talk about, but so they needed specific people.
Okay.
So they asked questions like, hey, what's your language proficiency? What's your PT score? What's your height? They were asking very specific.
They're very choosy.
Yeah. So that's the extent of what I knew what I was getting into, because it was literally a white piece of paper in my first sergeant. Like, this is the criteria. Do you want to go? I was like, yeah, I guess. They're like, good, because you're the only one that fits it. And so me and there was like 12 of us all together. And then they were like, hey, we're going to brief you. This is what we're going to do. So I was like, all right, cool. So we're going to go to this village. We got to talk to these people. And it was a bunch of, they're like nuns. They take care of orphanages. They do a lot of
all the Catholic missions.
Yeah. So that's what they used us for. It's kind of like it makes it more comfortable.
Sure.
It's like what we did in Afghanistan.
Which is good CA work.
Yeah.
Can you say where specifically? As in country?
Yeah, it was in Honduras.
In Honduras?
Yeah. I didn't find out till afterwards, though. Because when we left, it was not known where we were headed. So
you just showed up at an airport and you were in a different country and you didn't know which country
it wasn't even an airport. We were over on the other side of Pope. Yep. I was like, okay, we got picked up in a van. They took us over there. They're like, all right. And then, the Air Force pilots are great. They're like, next stop, Hawaii. We'll be landing in da-da-da-da. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty short trip for Hawaii. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, well, we could either be across the Atlantic, because that's about 8 hours, or we could be somewhere down south. So I kind of did some deductive reasoning. And then once we got off, I looked around. I'm like, this looks familiar. We're somewhere down south.
So while you were in Honduras, how much time did you actually get, if any, to go out into the local environs and experience the culture and food and people and specifically the food?
I guess the whole time, because quite frankly, I didn't know what the main focus was. So I was like doing what the CA guys were doing. They were like going to all these different restaurants.
Go with the flow.
Yeah. So, they were, doing what CA folks do. They're kind of like, mapping out the landscape and kind of getting feel of what's going on around them. But I don't know that this is what they're doing in their peripherals. I'm just like tagging along, whatever.
Well, I mean, you said when you were younger, based on your grandfather and your uncle's experiences, that you wanted to travel and see the world. Yeah. So at least it wasn't a desert. That's fair,
because I got sick of that like really quick.
I saw it as purgatory.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing how quickly you can get tired of endless sand or just a mountain that you can't see the top of.
I know, and I often ask myself, like, what type of, you don't know what you don't know, right? So you grew up there, your family's from there, you like, what are you talking about? Sand is beautiful in the mountains. And I'm like, have you been to America? Like, we have all the ecosystems. It's great. So I did get to see quite a bit because we were on foot a lot, and we were with local, a lot of local government people that were taking us around to all the different places that needed some focus. So I guess I did see it, but for me, it's just like, I love getting absorbed in other cultures. Yeah. Like, I love to know the things and what makes them tick and how they live their lives, because you kind of get, you get nearsighted when you're in the States sometimes if you don't get exposed to other things.
I think in that sense, most Americans are very nearsighted.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things, like, you just try to absorb everything, right? Yeah. So, I mean, now thinking back, I'm like, man, that was a pretty crap conditions. We were staying, the hotel was destroyed by the hurricane. So there were like goats and chickens everywhere. I mean, the walls were like moldy and there's barely any windows. There was no place to like really bathe. I mean, but it was all like a great adventure for me. So I'm just like, it's just like being in the field. I didn't think I was going to be there that long.
Again.
Have you not learned?
I haven't learned my lesson. And the other thing too is like, when you volunteer for things, like, gosh, they make it sound so good. Like, you just want an adventure from the mundane, right? You go to work, you do the same thing at 07, you're going to be in the motor pool. 09, you're going to be doing this. 11:30, you're going to be doing that. So when they're like, hey, it's an opportunity to go do something else, you're like, yes. And then you're like, no.
Well, there's different schools of thought on this, because sometimes volunteering for something coming down the pike is a good idea, because first sergeant has 2 or 3 other things that need to get done, and they're keeping those for last.
So the people that don't volunteer.
Yeah, so it's like, I would rather go, do all this mopping than whatever the next crew's got to go do. So.
And it's probably something a lot worse.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I will say that when it's with a different soft unit, I'm very cautious about it. Yeah. I just remember telling one of my old squad leaders was like, she was from, I think, Haiti or maybe somewhere in the Caribbean. I want to say Haiti. But she said the first time she volunteered, for one of those assignments, she was like, they were doing a training event. You remember when pirates were actually going on cruise ships?
Yeah.
So they were doing something similar to kind of like, train people for that type of event. And they weren't told that. So she's like, yeah, you know, they're like taking us on this cruise ship. We're eating and having a great time. And, you know, and then all of a sudden things changed. But they want the most realistic reaction, right? There's controls in place, but you're not aware of that when you're in the moment. So you're just like, oh my gosh. And she's like, girl, I tried to jump over the edge. And you know, she's so funny. She's like, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I thought we were being boarded. And she's like, I tried to jump over the rail and somebody grabbed me and they're like, Index, calm down.
It was about to get real again.
Good times, man. I mean,
as far as training goes, being on a cruise ship, not that bad.
It's not the worst thing that could happen. You could be in NTC, JRTC, 29 Palms. Like, they're all the worst. So
you get back from Honduras.
Yeah.
You have a taste now for civil affairs operations. There, at this point in the regiment's history, there's no assessment and selection for CA and PSYOP. That comes years later. So you at some point make a choice to join the CA regiment. What does this look like?
My dearly departed Sergeant Major asked me to come to his office after I got back because I was like, what was that? And he was like, hey, they have this new program. It's like, you know, it's called Civil Affairs. I'm like, oh yeah, I was with those guys. And they're like, they have an assessment and selection board. I think you'd be great for it, because I wasn't going to re-enlist because I was done. They had lost me twice to continue on, you know, because I was supposed to be on 2004, but didn't happen. So then he was like, you may as well just re-enlist. You're already like almost to 8 years anyway.
That's how they get you.
Every time. They're like, if you go and re-enlist.
Then once you're over 10, I mean, you'd be crazy not to.
Why not? You know? So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I got selected. And I was the first long class, because before it was like 2 weeks. It was like an ASI. And then it was 9 weeks. And then they're like 10 months. And then 10 months turned into a year. And I'm like, gosh, man. Because our language school used to send people to DLI. And then they brought them
Defense
to
Language Institute. Yeah.
Sorry, I keep forgetting that people may not know these acronyms.
That's okay.
In Monterey. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then they were like, no, let's bring it to Fort Bragg because it's a lot cheaper. So unfortunately, I got stuck on, you know, Krueger. So.
Did you get to choose your language?
No. Well, yeah, the second time. So
Okay.
the first time I got Arabic, and I was like, they did like your first week of familiarization. And I was like, hey, I'm not going to pass this. So I don't want to not pass the program. So is there any like language that needs more people? And they're like, here's Tagalog. I'm like, I'll do it. So.
You said, oh.
Yeah, opo. Yes, sir, I'll do it. So that's how I ended up getting that language. I knew that like Arabic is, even spending that much time in the Middle East and, you know, being around contractors and trying to learn the local language, it's not all the same. And it's not easy. Like, it's not easy.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I want to be successful at this, I got to at least, give myself a chance.
Yep.
And that's how I got Tagalog.
And that was at the beginning of the qualification course back then.
Yep.
It's changed a little bit now. But so it's 6 months?
Yeah.
So 6 months of sun up to sundown language
all day,
every day.
And they had to break our group up too. So we had night class and day class or day school or whatever. So like I spent the first 6 months, or the first 6 months I was during the day, and then 3 months I was at night school, and then we switched back, and it was a mess.
What was the reason for that?
We just had so many students.
It's throughput.
Yeah.
Because I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So many students. So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to go through.
So 6 months of language, and then you have the rest of your MOS portion of the qualification course. So as a 38 Bravo Civil Affairs Specialist, which it's changed since then, by the way, as you know. So, but you're 38 Bravo.
Yeah, so they did like, I remember, so we had like the SOF integration. I don't know if they were still doing that, where you had like PSYOP and CA together. That was crazy too. Because it's just, a lot of it is just a lot to consume. But lucky for me, I'd spent 3 years in PSYOP, so I had a pretty good idea of how things worked, and PSYOP doctrine and things like that. So that was a pretty easy portion for me. Tagalog was easy because it's a lot of Spanish derivatives, so I didn't have to, it wasn't a far leap for me because I knew Spanish. And then the last portion of it was just, it was a challenge. And I think it's because, like, you know, I had like maybe 4 female officers, and I was the only female NCO at the time. So they were very helpful, but they were kind of like in their own struggle, right? Trying to kind of match up
on the struggle bus.
Yeah, they were on the struggle bus with their officer peers, and you know, it's just different. All these guys come from different places for different reasons. We didn't, you know, as a female in SOF, you know, going through that pipeline, it wasn't because we couldn't cut it in infantry or we didn't cut it going through the Green Beret course or whatever. It's because we chose, you know. So I just felt like there was a little bit more pressure on us to excel. Like, don't screw this up. You know, you're the first female NCO to go through this. And
no pressure.
Would you consider that good pressure, or is that a negative thing?
It was both. Because,
Okay.
like, it kept me very focused. Because I'm like, no matter how bad this sucks, I gotta finish. But then the pressure became like, it was all I could think about. I was so obsessed with like not disappointing people that I didn't even know, you know. And I'm like, I don't want to be the reason why they won't accept other females in this course. So that was, I don't know, it was like both. Some days it was great because it was very motivating, right? So I'm like, on the days that sucked, you know, that pressure helped me. But on the days that I just wanted to kind of just, you know, turn on autopilot, that's all I could think about. And I was like, no, I mean, come on, just give it more effort, you know. And because there was a lot of moments where I definitely felt like I was not a part of the team. Like,
Okay.
And it's just the mentality. It's not their fault.
There's some old boy.
Yeah, some good old boy stuff.
Of course that's
and I think it's like, you know, people don't typically think about it like that unless they're given an environment where that type of thinking thrives. So it's not their fault. It's like a fraternity or a sorority, you know. So I typically don't try to blame that type of behavior entirely on the person. So I think you're a product of your environment sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. But you get through.
Yeah. You made it
And
through.
at this point, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
What was the success fail rate?
Oh man, we were.
I mean,
losing.
they were running 2 schools concurrently, or 2 classes concurrently.
I think that, I mean, the attrition rate was really, really high when I first got there. We were losing people left and right. I think the hardest part for a lot of people was the language. And, I mean, you had the opportunity to change if you wanted to, so it's not like they didn't give you an opportunity.
So some of the failures would have been self-inflicted.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, so this is one of the things, too. They were accepting people as E5s and E6s. And a lot of them had not been to, like, you know, Warrior Leaders course, Basic Leaders course. So you had to finish that first.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of us went through BLC or ALC. Then we went to language. Then we did regional studies, and so on and so forth. So a lot of us were there for like over a year trying to complete all of this stuff.
It's been streamlined since then. I won't get into the weeds with all
this
that.
This is 15 years ago.
But I will say that the language was front loaded in the qualification course because the reasoning behind that was
people are going to fail.
If you're going to fail, let's get it out of the way now and not.
Well, it's the most expensive part of it.
Don't invest all your time and energy going through all these other steps when they're just going to fail out.
Stuff has changed.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so at this point, is the rest of the 95th Civil Affairs Brigade, have they stood up the other battalions, or are we still just the 96th?
No, the 97th was there. The 92nd came along a little bit later.
So they're needing to fill these formations.
Yeah,
so,
that's why they were just like,
yeah.
But I will say that I felt like, you know, toward the end, when you got to your regional studies and you were doing your briefings and your country studies and stuff like that, I think they got a little bit more tight on how many people they were going to let through, because they knew at this point, like, hey, these are the teams that are in the beginning. They're like, we just need to at least have 100 people per class. And then when they got to the end, they're like, all right, let's make sure that we're at least giving people a good 80% solution, not getting every, because some of those guys and gals, they slipped through the cracks, and I don't think that this was the life for them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just fair to say. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So you show up to the 97th, which is a Civil Affairs battalion. It's brand new. It has history behind it, but it's been reconstituted as a new unit, and it is oriented towards, at the time, PACOM. Now we call it Indo-PACOM, but we'll just say the Asian theater, which is vast, of course.
Yeah.
So
sure.
You are a young NCO in a new unit that is covering the largest piece of geography in the world. What happens next?
We had a great battalion commander. He was so funny. But I remember the first time I met him. Like I said before, like SOF is just a different beast.
It is.
It really is. And I didn't spend a lot of time in conventional army. So, going to PSYOP and then CA, like I only spent 3 years in the engineers. So even though I'm all about structure or whatever, they're like, hey, there's some things in SOF that we kind of like we're willing to assume a little bit of risk on. So, lax grooming standards, different PT times and stuff like that. But
grown folks rules.
Yeah, grown folks rules. But I remember meeting my battalion commander and sergeant major for the first time, and the battalion commander comes up in like this silver, like I don't know what kind of sports car it was, but it was a drop top. I didn't know who he was. I thought it was a civilian because he wasn't wearing a uniform. And like he's like walking up and he's like, hey, how's it going? And I didn't know people called each other by their first names either. And I was like, oh, he must be a civilian. There's no reason why anybody would be doing this. And we go into, we're sitting outside of, they were old World
War II barracks. Yeah.
So we're like sitting on the bench.
Which are no longer with us.
Yeah. And the sergeant major calls us into the office, and this civilian guy is like sitting over there, and like, yeah, sergeant major, I gotta get my stuff signed off by the battalion commander, and blah blah blah. And he's like, well, how do you like the unit? I've only been there for 5 minutes. I don't know. I was like,
great.
Things are different. Yeah,
it's different. That's different. Charitable.
It's very authentic here.
There you go.
But yeah, and he was like, oh, so what do you think about this? And I'm like, answering all these questions and not knowing that guy is my new boss. But I was like, oh, I didn't realize that this guy that was wearing board shorts and flip-flops was our battalion commander.
That sounds like the 97th.
It was great. But yeah, it was different because a lot of the guys that were there, they came from engineer units, and a lot of them hadn't worked with females before.
Very much, especially the enlisted.
Yeah. The only females that they came in contact were in their orderly room. And I'll never forget. So my first team sergeant was Matt Slustiller, and
rest in peace.
Yeah, it's so strange. We were jumping together because we were about to deploy, and I had lost my helmet, and he's like,
again?
"Hey, I'm telling you,
I'm sensing a pattern."
Yeah, it might just be me. You might be the problem. But yeah, I'll never forget. Like, so I had to do 3 jumps to catch up, and Matt had already gone. And on my second one, I was like, man, the strap broke. So when the risers were coming up, it just flew off, and I'm like, well, that's gonna suck when I land. But it was the softest landing I had in jumping in like 10 years.
Dash ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was so soft. I was like, thank you, God.
Those you can't actually steer those.
Yeah, you're actually just kind of. But so he was like, yeah, you just use my helmet, give it to me after you're done. But I was like on the last chalk. Ain't nobody waiting for us. We were out there just shaking chutes, and we were like the only people out there.
You shake your own chutes.
Yeah. How dare they? But yeah, so I didn't get an opportunity to give him his helmet back ever. So I still have it.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. But yeah, so he was like my little, like, I don't know, like guardian angel. Like, he taught me everything. He was like, hey, these guys are like, they're engineers, man, and some of them have never worked with females before. They're not used to having to accommodate. Because you know how the old team rooms used to be upstairs, like they didn't have any females up there, so they could walk around in gym shorts and whatever. So he was just like, you can fit in. It's not a big deal. Just kind of participate. Don't stand off. Like, force them to acknowledge that you're here. And I was like, that's cool. So him and my husband. Yeah, I didn't know he was going to be my husband, but he was the second person I met when I got there, and him and I'm not even Justin Orr. I love him so much.
I know Justin.
Yeah. So him and Justin kind of like took me under their wing, and it took them a long time. I would say it wasn't like months, but it took too much time for you guys to, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. A lot of them thought I worked in the orderly room.
The Army's come a long way.
It has. I mean, I kid, like, I'm really good friends with all these guys now. It just, everything is just, it's like after you've gone to the desert or you've gone to any country in South Asia for repeated times, you start to realize those default mindsets. It's just a foundation of what people know. Once you get exposed to it, you can change those.
Yeah, sure.
So they just had to get used to seeing me in their face all the time. That's all.
So what's your first deployment in the 97th?
Well, before we get into that, let's go ahead and take a quick break.
Yeah, that's
quick break.
Flavor of the month.
All right.
Okay, shall we?
Yes.
I'll kick it back off here.
Let us carry on. Scene.
Okay.
Action.
Okay, we're back. So we wanted to talk about your first deployment when you were in the 97th. So this is going to be Asia oriented. So where'd you go and what was it like?
So I first, our team got split up. So Matt and David and the other guys went to CENTCOM, and then the rest of us got attached to SOCPAC in Hawaii.
Yep. Special Operations Command Pacific.
I'll remember to say that. Such a long phrase. So yeah, I ended up going to SOCPAC, and I was there for several weeks before I got sent to Bangladesh as an augmentee in the embassy there. That was fun.
If I can interject here, so you went to Camp Smith, which is up on the high
on
part
the hill.
There. It's on Oahu, but it's basically the high ground there in Honolulu, and you're overlooking Pearl Harbor. It's beautiful. Then you go to Bangladesh. The mission that you were supporting there this is a callback to a previous episode when Mr. Mike M2 McCusker was here 2 episodes prior to yours. He is one of the gentlemen that helped write 7500. So the authorities that you were deploying under to go to Bangladesh were the authorities that were written in the order that Mr. M2 wrote for us.
Yep.
So tell us about Bangladesh, or as we like to call it,
the dish.
Mordor.
Yeah. Oh, that's so accurate. Man, I don't even know. My first time going there, it wasn't intentional. Things happened and I had to go. So, I wasn't really prepared because I know Tagalog, I don't know Bengali. So I had to call my good friend Mamoon up. And I'm like, hey man, teach me some things before I roll out. It's different. I remember saying to myself, if every person got an opportunity to live here, this world would be a better place. Because
perspective, they
are doing the most with very little. And I mean, it was such a different experience than, going to the Middle East. I don't know, I don't know what I was prepared to know or understand. I tried to learn as much as possible, but when I say a quick turnaround, I came back from a weekend and they were like, you get on a flight on Tuesday. And I was like, all right, I got to figure this out. Luckily, the guys that were already there, we were all together at some point, either during training, or, in the few months before we deployed. So it wasn't too strenuous of a experience for me. But when I got there, they're like, hey, weren't you a 12 Yankee? And I was like, yeah. They're like,
who's asking?
Exactly. I became the embassy, I don't know what the word is, GIS.
Was it the ArcGIS?
Yeah. I ended up being like the ArcGIS specialist for the country team. And I did all of their whatever they needed. And it was like brushing up because I'm like, okay, I did this 10 years ago, so I'm going to try to figure out all the newest, greatest. I mean, I literally taught myself. I remember calling my first sergeant, Tommy Borton, and I'm like, I have no idea. And he's like, better start Googling.
Yeah.
So I taught myself.
Google knows all.
Yeah. So he was like, here's some resources. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but.
Yeah. And when you say country team, it's a very broad. Yeah. So it's the U.S. Embassy permanent party personnel, which is a lot. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Your Policon, Department of Agriculture, you have your Department of Justice, it's just, I don't know, their S3 staff.
And it's going to be very different. Every country team
every country team is different.
You serve at the pleasure of the ambassador in any particular given. So I mean, you're there.
but you're not there.
You're there working in special operations authorities.
Yeah.
But there's so many different bosses you have.
Yeah, so many bosses.
Literally have, and then on the record and off the record.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's very true. So it's a very tight rope you have to walk. I mean, you literally have to try to please everybody because, there's a lot of initiatives that are going on that you're not aware of. So you kind of working in that space, doing what we do, you have to be very cognizant of everybody that's on the field. So, I got stuck in a cage, and I did a lot of the GIS work, and we worked with the USAID too. So we had an opportunity to develop a program based off of some work that we had saw in Japan as far as like their disaster response programs. So we developed this multi-purpose cyclone shelter, but they called it something else now. I don't know what they changed it to, but so I spent the first time probably like the last 3 months of their deployment. They're just kind of like setting up what that program was going to look like.
That became an enduring program.
Yeah. It was pretty surprising that it worked. But, we did, ask the experts and kind of a little bit of ingenuity on our own. Yeah. I mean, there's so many smart people that come through this program. Like, CA's got a lot of smart bubbas.
So as a young NCO doing a mission like this, I mean, like, what did you learn when you walked away from that mission?
I learned that, man, nothing's really hard. You make it hard because you have all of these expectations on yourself. It's not easy, but it's not hard. It's not impossible to do anything. And I went in thinking I wasn't prepared because this is not the country that I studied for. So I had that in my mind, like, oh man, you're already on a learning curve. And then they're like, hey, we want you to drop back on some other expertise that I brain dumped as soon as I went to civil affairs. So I was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people depending on my ability to do this. And so I did well. And, a number of years later, I can say that, but I had a lot of imposter syndrome because I was like, what am I doing? Like, why are these people asking me these things?
Please define imposter syndrome. A lot of people may not be familiar. Well, it's kind of
like you don't think that you deserve to be where you're at doing what you do and people asking you for your opinion, because I don't hold myself in that regard. I just know things because I read things and I ask people that know the things that I want to learn about. So when there's like different agencies asking me to do stuff for them and like, asking me what my opinion is and, I'm actually doing analysis for them based on the work they're giving me, I was just like, why are they asking me this stuff? Like, go ask somebody else. Like, I've only been doing this for 6 months. So I dealt with that a lot. But then after walking away from that, I'm like, actually, I do know what I'm doing. So good job by me.
It's a confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence builder.
And it also, your team kind of helps with that as well. Because, like, everyone has their role, like your team leader, your team sergeant, your medic, your engineer, whomever, however you break up that team, everybody has something that they're strong, that they bring to the team. So, I didn't know what I was going to bring. Like, these guys all had like combat, MOS backgrounds. So I'm just kind of trying to figure it out. Yeah. But I realized like a lot of the tertiary things and the peripheral things I was learning in the engineers and learning from like Matt, because he was an engineer before, I was using to do the site surveys for these schools and these. Yeah. So like all those things started like kind of like, making sense, and kind of the puzzle pieces were fitting together. And I was like, I can do this. And then, your team is like, yeah, like give it to Ivy, she can do it, or give it to Terry, he can do it. So it was good. But I did also learn that, I've hit a new level of suck, because I don't know if you guys ever been to Bangladesh before, but God bless them, all of them. It's
Mordor.
It's a difficult place to live,
Yeah, you said earlier that they were doing a whole lot with a whole little, or something like that. Yeah. What exactly do you mean by that?
I mean, the poverty is just, I can't even describe it. Like, I remember, man, this is going to sound horrible, but, I'm looking outside my window of where we're staying at, and, I'm just like, sipping on my coffee, and I'm looking down, and I'm watching people break bricks into smaller bricks, breaking it into smaller bricks to make gravel, and they're doing it all by hand. Like, even the transport from one location to another, I'm talking about tons of gravel that was and they're building a building right next door, and they're using very like rustic, construction methods. Meanwhile, like, you can drive anywhere around here and you see cranes and you see all these things, and they're very artisanal in the way that they do work. And I'm like, man, I take so many things for granted, And I often thought to myself too, I was like, I could have woke up anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, I could have woken up anywhere. Like, I mean, the privilege that you have, and I know this is going to sound crazy. I'm just kidding. But when I say I'm patriotic, I am very grateful that I woke up in this country. Like, I could be anywhere. And I've been so many places in my military career. I'm like, man, y'all better stop playing. America's like the best place on earth. And I know there's a lot of like things going on right now that give people pause, and they're like, oh, how are we going to do it? We can. I promise you, it's going to suck. I have literally been in the suckiest of sucks. And I'm like, what commander thought this was a good idea? You know what I mean? But it's not about the commander. It's about the people that are executing and that are living that life. Yeah. You are in charge of your destiny, and how these things happen to you and happen to others. Like, keep that in mind, because in the end, they're not going to know who I am and what I'm doing. They just know that, hey, this is your, strategic objective, and this is not about you. It's not about me. It's about everybody. Yeah. And like, you got to keep that in your mind. And so, like, I don't know. Every day I woke up in Bangladesh, I was kissing my blue passport. I'm not gonna lie.
That is a healthy perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's like we said before, that Americans tend to be very nearsighted.
Yeah.
And that's because they lack the world experience. Mm-hmm. Oh, I went to vacation in Ibiza.
Or something like that.
I took a weekend in Cabo. Or, I ran with the Bulls in Barcelona. Oh, that's great.
You mispronounced Barcelona.
Barcelona.
There we go. Got to get that TH in there.
Barcelona. Ibiza. Yes. But yes, because you took a couple of weeks vacation and you stayed in a nice fancy hotel and surrounded by porters and everything, that doesn't make it a great place.
No, you got to live in the bush.
Yeah.
And
you got to get in the trenches. I'm telling you, I remember the first time, like, we did like this social at the embassy. They were like, have you got the... It's not vulgar, but it's kind of gross. But they're like, have you got the Dakadukis yet? I'm like, what's that? I found
Montezuma's Revenge.
Oh, man. I literally found out that night I was down for 4 days. And I was like, I didn't even eat
you didn't
anything.
eat the crab dip, did you?
No. So they were like, just go out.
It was the salmon mousse.
They're like, go to the Westin Hotel. There's like a food cart. That's where you got to get acclimated and get your body used. Just go have some food down there, and that's the cleanest one, right outside the Gulshan. It was horrific.
Yeah.
It was so bad. I was like, and they're like, no, you're good now. Your body's ready. You made it. I'm like, all right.
You survived Montezuma's Revenge.
Well, we don't really need to go further into that.
No. But yeah, so that was my first. I went to Bangladesh. I was a repeat offender. I went the first time out of necessity, and the second time, I was out of necessity because they needed somebody that was familiar with the landscape and who had been a part of the initiating of this program. So I went out there the second time.
Womp womp.
Well, the second time I got to see a lot more of the country than I did the first time, because the first time I was kind of like in the embassy the whole entire time, just kind of doing that thing and doing a little bit of sightseeing.
So those were back to back?
Yeah.
Okay. So
now, at this point, you've been in for over 10 years.
I was right at 10 years. Right?
So did you know that this was career time?
Oh, no. I didn't even re-enlist until I was at 11. Because it was an overlap, right? Mm-hmm. So I hadn't gone indefinite yet, but I had gotten stop lost.
Yep.
So I had a little bit of an 18-month window where I was going to overlap my 10 years. But it was meant to be that way. It was meant to be that way because that's when they were handing out the SRBs. And they were like, hey, what's your language? What's your score? Are you a team sergeant? Are you deployed? Are you in a combat zone? Oh, yes, I am. Sign my name. So that's what I did. But yeah, so Bangladesh was my first, second, and then my third was Indonesia. My fourth was Indonesia. My fifth was Singapore. And then a couple of places in between.
Yeah, Singapore was after I left. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to summarize for the audience, it's the same overall mission that you're doing, just obviously
just different
countries. So trying to assist the country teams in identifying ungoverned areas and trying to apply resources, funding.
Yeah, you're trying to connect the dots.
Identifying, just connecting dots. You're hurting a lot of cats. You're working with USAID. You're working with the Department of Justice. You're working with the host nation. In some cases, you're working with the host nation military. That's all. Every mission's gonna be a little bit different.
Yeah.
But every mission's kind of hairy, kind of cool, kind of groovy.
Yeah, because people, I mean, I've always, people are like, why is your CA team different from what they do? Well, because they're wearing uniforms and you're not. I'm like, well, you gotta kind of look at it in a different perspective, because like they can mash a button and then there's a black helicopter coming to save the day. When you're out on a 3 or 4 person team,
nobody's coming.
There's nobody coming for you.
Nothing.
Even the embassy ain't coming for you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And you don't have any weapons. It's all this up here.
Yeah.
So you got to be on your toes. You got to watch your six. Literally, you have to be able to read a room. Like, things can change abruptly. I mean, we talk about those training events that we had, and we were gearing to go to Afghanistan. And you're watching the room, and that's fine. But if something goes hairy, everybody can react, right? But if
you're carrying too.
Exactly, everybody can react. But when you're in a different space and it's literally just you and your team leader and an entire village of people, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're 8 hours from the embassy, and they don't even necessarily know where you're at. It is you gotta be really just humble and be willing to learn, and don't be that ugly American. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's very much a very cerebral type of job that you're doing out there. So, but yeah, that was PACOM.
So let's talk about your NCO development. So you come in as a civil affairs NCO. So that's on a small 4-person team. So you're really the junior NCO on the team. At some point, you become a team sergeant, which is, I assume you're a sergeant first class at this point. So you're the senior non-commissioned officer on a team with one captain that's usually kind of a mid-level captain, relatively new to the regiment, but not new to the Army anyway. At some point, you surpass your time as a team sergeant. What do you do next after your team time?
I don't know. It's kind of weird because I kind of flip-flop back and forth. Because I was the CMOC NCOIC / first sergeant.
And what's a CMOC?
So it's like your operations center, right? So I guess regular Army folks, I don't know what that's called for them. I don't know what it's called for regular Army, but for the SOF particularly, it's like your operations center, and you have your 5th man that's where they reside, or 5th person, if you will. That's where they reside, because teams aren't always 4 persons, and countries don't always allow 4 persons. So if you have 2 people, you'll keep the other 2 back in the CMOC, and they'll kind of like run your reports for you, do some research for you, kind of do the things that you can't do with the 2 of you in country. So that was my experience. It was just me and my team leader, and our 2 persons were back in Hawaii or back in Singapore. So when I eventually moved to the CMOC, I was in Singapore. But like, it was different, right? Because it's not your typical CMOC that you have like an entire staff of SOCPAC individuals that can help you like shape your operations. In Singapore, we were it. So like, they had one staff person from each directorate, and you're the TSOC forward and you're the CMOC. So we had to do our first sergeant's and commander's job and our CMOC and CMOC OIC job.
Yeah.
And then we were like the 4th person on their team. So, because a lot of the countries that we were in at the time, I think there was only like 2 countries that had 4 persons.
Yeah.
So we were doing a lot of the back end work for those guys and gals that were out there while I was in Singapore. It was different. It was fun. It was
so you're a master sergeant at this point, or you're still a sergeant first class?
I was master sergeant.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did that, and then so you're kind of working as the first sergeant, and you're kind of working as the CMOC.
Of course.
OIC. So, and then when I came back to Fort Bragg is when I briefly spent, I don't know, a couple months as the 97th first sergeant before I went over to, and that was out of necessity. Things happened, and as I was leaving to go to the 85th, I took over They were, but they were already starting to shut down battalions by then, right?
Yeah.
So, but that was fun. It was different. I hadn't been in the big army in a while, and it was terrifying.
So where did you go in the 85th?
I was in the 83rd.
So here at Bragg.
Yeah. So I was in the 83rd, and then that's when they had consolidated, right? So then I had the Paycom company, which is great. But, when you're a first sergeant, even a senior leader in SOF, your youngest soldier is probably your supply sergeant, and even then he's probably E5 or E6 with several years under his belt. But I had never been around privates until I was a private the last time I was around a private. Mm-hmm. So that was a challenge. That was a very, very, very challenging time for me.
Well, you spent so many years now, the majority of your career being around far more experienced.
Yeah, it was different.
Probably mostly career-driven people. And now you are thrust in charge of
18 and 19-year-olds.
18 and 19-year-olds.
And it was a challenge. I will say, it was a challenge. I can't describe it any other way.
Okay, well, that kind of ends that question. What is just specifically one of the challenges that you were just completely unprepared for? I cannot believe that I have to deal with this.
I don't think I've ever told somebody how to live their life. Once they left work, I didn't, unless we were buddies, pals, where I got invited over, I didn't get into people's business. So when you have an 18-year-old me and my boyfriend are going to get married and buy a house, I'm like, what? You're a specialist. You can't afford this. How are you? Mm-hmm. And then I have to kind of walk them through.
Are you pre-approved?
Yeah, but it was just stuff that I did not think that I would have to, or I will say the moment that kind of I don't know if I can keep doing this. I had a soldier that was in a relationship with another soldier in a different battalion, and he was always in trouble, and it was because they had a very volatile relationship, and so I was like, hey, we're going to do a restraining order, no contact, because clearly you guys can't communicate without getting in trouble, and. My husband had already got out of the military, so he's, on the other side of the wire doing his thing, and we have an opportunity to go on vacation together. So I'm like, hey, I'm just going to take a week off, and I'm going to go meet my husband in Montana. And, my commander's like, no, we got it. It's not a big deal. What could happen in a week? So that's
so much.
First sergeants don't get time off.
Oh, I know, absolutely. And I was there 2 days before I got the first phone call, and that same service member, they went down to Myrtle Beach. They overindulged, got into a fight, a massive fight. Got arrested. One was in the hospital. One was in jail. And I was I had been literally gone for 2 days, and I was like, I don't know. And then, so I come back, sorry, I got to go to work. And I get back and I'm just like, okay, so what happened to you not contacting this service member? You had the direct order from the commander to stay away. So how did you end up in a hotel with them in Myrtle Beach? And so I was like, all right, so I have to decide now, do I punish you for you're in the hospital. So you have to think about that. Is it overkill to now I have to punish you on top of the fact that you're here with a broken rib and a nose that's busted, it was just too much. I was like, I don't want to be a part of dealing with something like this all the time, because you should know better. If we can trust you with $7 million worth of equipment, why can't I trust you with 7 hours on your own on the weekend? It seemed a little too excessive for me. I don't know. I was just stressed out all the time. And then, they finally get released and we're going through the whole entire UCMJ thing, and then they get married. And I'm like, what? They get married in the middle of their UCMJ.
You just don't understand their love.
I don't. That's a love that you gotta, most people hope for, man. If it ain't like that, then I don't want it, But that honestly was one of the moments where I'm like, I don't think I can do this, man. this soldier bought a, what are those? They leased a Bugatti. And I'm like, how did they even say, but leased one. And so they got their tax return back. They had been deployed, so they got an earned income credit. And I was like, you can't afford this. Oh, yeah, because I'm going to spread out my deployment money. Oh, my goodness. And the irresponsible car dealership that thought that was a good idea, like, they should be put on a blacklist because you're taking advantage of a 22-year-old that has no... So this is the type of stuff I'm just like... Is this really what they do?
You went from spending the majority of your career in sort of an ultra-professional, you're an adult, behave as an adult environment, and now you're in charge of children.
Basically. And the discouraging part about it was this, is like, I talked to my friends that were like drill sergeants, and I said, how did this become the norm? Like, what happened there? But things got a little bit different. People were stressed out, and they're like, hey, we've been at war for a long time. Like, we gotta try to figure out a way to... The trauma of being in a country where we're at war, we're seeing all of these people come home just like completely just, in a different headspace. There's a thing called secondary PTSD, so like a lot of these kids that were in my company had parents that were my peers, which is, oh my goodness, right? But I can understand why, they had to take a different approach in basic training. Like, these kids weren't equipped to deal with the things that we unfortunately find pretty normal. So I was just like, all right, so let me just try to find a different way to connect to this younger demographic that I'm in charge of now. I only had like 8 of them. Some of them were like really eager to kind of get the experience of somebody that's been in SOF, because none of them have ever done that before. But they were in civil affairs, so they're like, oh, what it's like over there. So I just had to take a different approach to it, but it took me a minute. It took me like 6 months. So
one of the first sergeants I ever had when I was a young lieutenant, he had this real thick Ozark accent, and I'd walk in the mornings some days and say, hey, First Sergeant, how you doing this morning? He'd look at me like he'd probably been in there for hours, and I'm talking, this was like before PT, right?
Right.
He'd just look at me and say, sir, 10% of my soldiers take up 90% of my time.
I was told that at the pre-command course. I was like, you know what? They're absolutely right. Every single time. But I mean, it was a challenge. I think that was the biggest leadership challenge that I had, was to understand people that I had not been a part of their daily existence for a very long time. I mean, even my nephew wasn't that young, so I was like, I don't know what to do with you people. But it turned out to be okay. I think it's just, we were learning each other, because, I was probably a lot tougher than they were used to. But it was because I didn't know how to control them. I mean, I felt like they were kids. I was like, but then, it just took a little bit of time for me to kind of understand, like, how that type of leadership
How to be around the Joes again.
Yeah. It took a little bit of time. It took me about 6 months, I'm not gonna lie. And a lot of it too is because, the 85th was consolidating down to this one battalion.
It all collapsed into one battalion. Mm-hmm.
So, we were dealing with those challenges. And then we were also supporting the 82nd. So we had a rotating teams that were going, over to the GRF.
The Global Response Force.
Yeah. Yep. So there was, and then we had teams that were, augmenting soft CA. So there was so much happening with my people. I kind of looked at my support folks like, all right, I got to get you guys up to speed, because unfortunately this is where our bread and butter is. But I also know that in order for you to succeed in your MOS, I have to make sure that we're hitting those key training points that you guys need. So it was just so much you had to try to juggle, because you have 88 mics, or you have transportation folks, you have logistics folks. We didn't have that. Like, they had their own thing, and they were up in headquarters, and that wasn't something a civil affairs first sergeant had to worry about. But when you're down in your conventional units, you have to make accommodations for all of those soldiers. So it just took me a little bit, but I was like, bear with me, and I won't eat you alive. So it worked out, though.
So you finish up your first sergeant time in the 83rd.
Yep, and then
you
go back to the 95th.
go back to the 95th or the 97th?
No, I went back to the 95th.
Okay, so you go to the brigade headquarters.
Yeah.
So you're back in special operations line. What do you do next?
Celebrate, buy a cake.
You would think,
some
right?
champagne.
You have to go do your basic airborne refresher.
Oh yeah, you got to do all the things, and oh man, it was great. No, yeah, I was in CHOPS the chief of operations.
Chief of operations, yeah.
So yeah, that was different because you got to see like what the other battalions were doing.
Yeah, very cool.
I did like that a lot. It was a challenge though because like it's just like having soldiers from different backgrounds. You got to learn every mission set, so you're giving everyone the appropriate, resources for the type of training they need for wherever they're going. So, but yeah, that was fun. And then I went back down to the 97th, and I was in the S3, and I was there S3 into IC for a bit, and then
So just operations,
Yeah.
just everything that's coming and going in the
all the
battalion.
things. Yeah, all the things. And then we were gearing up to go to Korea, and we're started our training, went out to JBLM, and then people started getting the sniffles, and then next thing you know, COVID hits.
If my memory serves, wasn't Seattle where it touched down first, at least that we know of course.
Yeah,
but,
that's the word on the street.
Yeah.
That's the word on the street, man. It was horrible.
So JBLM is Joint Base Lewis McChord out in
Yeah.
the Tacoma, Washington area.
Yeah. So, yeah, they were like, it's some things are astern. We got to get you guys back to Fort Bragg. And then, so we're like kind of trying to figure out like what's going on. And then I got to the point where I'm like, I think this is the cue to leave. So
Here's your sign.
yeah,
Here's your sign.
it was very uncertain times, right? And I knew that it was coming close. I was at like 18, 19 years at that point. So I was just kind of trying to decide if 6 more years was really going to be worth the time spent. Like, I mean, everyone gets to a certain point in their career. Like, if you don't hit a certain rank or certain career goal, like, are you going to be marketable when you leave? Like, are you leaving the party on time or too early or too late? But everybody goes through that little. But COVID kind of decided that for me because nobody knew what was going to happen next. Like, everything just kind of came to a standstill. And I was like, I think this would be a great opportunity to explore something else. So
one of the questions we ask all of our guests is, did you leave on your own terms?
Oh no, COVID decided it for me.
Okay.
I mean, like, when I say leave on my own terms, I knew I was going to do 20 and get out. So that wasn't something that was just like, oh. So I knew about at 14, 15 years, I was like, I'm just going to do 20 and get out. Ironically, I was a first sergeant. So, but yeah, I think COVID kind of like sped that up, right? Yeah. Because there were other things that were happening in my life that I was like, oh, I'm waiting for my husband to finish grad school. And then, I was in grad school, so I was like, let's just, kind of see what happens. And then sure enough, COVID, it was like, no, you're going home now. So that's what happened. And I remember my last day in the military, and it felt so surreal because it felt like my first day in the military. I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. No pomp and circumstance. Here's your paperwork, sign it, go. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, both of you retired under kind of similar circumstances.
Yeah.
Yes, I did the same thing. I retired during COVID when everything was locked down and all the briefings and everything that you're supposed to go to.
Presentations.
Yeah, you got an email. You got emailed a slide deck while you were at home, and it said, "Let me know when you've read this slide deck, and I'll check you as a go at this station."
Yeah,
and it's like
that's exactly how it was.
Isn't this supposed to be like a 4-hour briefing with guests and questions and things like that? And you're emailing me a slide deck?
Yeah, it was. I remember. Oh man, it was so sad, and I didn't feel anything. I was just like, oh, okay. I don't know if I just became desensitized or whatever happens when you've spent that much time in an institution like the military. But the lady that, I wish I could remember her name. I want to send her flowers because I know she was so upset. But it was me and 2 other sergeant majors and a lieutenant colonel. And we were like in these little plastic plexiglass little dividers.
I remember the dividers.
Yeah. And she was like, she was reading the thing off, and she's like, how do you want your name to be, printed on the certificate? I was like, just whatever. And then she starts crying, and she was like, I'm so sorry that this is all you get. You spent 20 years in the military. Because me and the other guys were like, man, let's get our stuff and go. But she, like, you know, had this whole entire speech, and she was like, thank you for your service, even if no one else is able to tell you, and I know you won't be able to see, you know, your comrades. And she's like, I hope it doesn't end this way for you guys. And I'm like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, normally the posts do a large retirement ceremony at a giant auditorium or theater. Yeah. And so you've got, you know, 2 dozen retirees that walk across the stage and they get their certificate, and, you know, the crowd applauds, and there's all the ceremony and everything behind that. But during the lockdown, they said no. None of that.
Couldn't even send information.
Nope. And so, you showed up to the lady who gave you your DD-214, and she hands you a little box with a flag in it.
I didn't even get that.
And your pen. It doesn't. It's the wrong size anyway.
But she was like, I'm sorry, but we have to sanitize everything, so I can't give it to you. I'll mail it to you. I was like, it's fine.
Those were wild
times to live in, man. Yeah. But yeah, that was it. Like, I mean, it was exactly how I came in. This is exactly how I left.
But successful Army career.
It was a great time.
A lot of good stuff. Yeah. So again, another question. I'll let Dan ask this one.
If you could go back, would you do it all again?
100% I would. I can't imagine doing anything else. And it's crazy because I don't want to do anything else, but you do, you know, like I say that because I don't think you could get, let's just say you only live once. What better way to do it? I can't even imagine, like, you know, your life, your entire life is just a story. And your goal in life is to have someone retell your story. That's what your legacy is. So if you're not going to have children, you know, and you're out there alone. I don't have any kids, right? I have 3 dogs and a husband. So how does your story get told? You got to do something extraordinary. And what better way than to serve your country, man? Like, you're in history books no matter what. Like, you're never going to die. You're always going to be a part of history. Now, if that, I don't know, that just, to me, that's, you can't ask for a better way to live. So whether you do 2 years or you do 20 years or 30 years, like, man, you picked a really extraordinary way to live. Like, no matter what country you're fighting for or whatever you're doing, but just to say, like, I'm going to spend my life in service to others and to my country. I don't think that you could, I don't think there's any other way. I think you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a blue collar, it doesn't matter, but like there's I don't know, I want to say they're boring, but I'm like, it's an adventure every day in the military. Every day. Even the boring.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, right?
Yeah, even in the, the mundane, like, we know what we're doing generally all the time, but it's always something exciting happening. You're like, is this real life? Is this what they paid me to do? So yeah, I'd do it all over again.
You are not the first, and I dare say you won't be the last to express that same sentiment.
But it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, but also when you're in it, you're just like, God, when is it going to be over?
Yeah.
Well, when you're a private and you're doing a police call at a range, and there's 3 feet of snow, and you're looking for that
little brass.
Yeah, you're looking for a half dozen expended rounds. Yeah, it doesn't really seem like
in
an
a
adventure
4-acre field.
Yes.
Hands across Sicily looking for a pair of night vision goggles.
Oh my goodness. But like that, you can't have that experience anywhere else. Like, it's great.
I had a young NCO. I was a young lieutenant. We were sitting on a observation post in Afghanistan, and I remember just making kind of an offhand comment like, man, I can't wait till this deployment's over so we can go do blah 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 blah. And this guy was younger than me, and he looks at me and he goes, life is what happens in between all the moments that you are waiting for, the next thing. He's like, just live in the moment. No, it's what we're doing here isn't all that fun. It's not that great, but he's like, live in the moment.
Yeah.
And it was one of the wisest things I ever heard.
It's a great story. I often, I think about, like, man, I spent a lot of time, like, serving my country, and like, what do I got to show for it? But I'm like, man, what a great story to tell. Like, I just think that everyone, no matter what you do, you should try to make the best of it. But also, like, what's going to happen the day that after you're gone, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what did you do to, like, cement, like, who you were when you were here? And I wouldn't want to be remembered any other way, And that's why I try to make sure every experience I have with people, it's like a good experience.
The what's your legacy question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want one that, it's titillating, you join the military, see what happens. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Do you have any parting shots for us before we unwind here?
No, this was fun though. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed reminiscing. I hadn't done it in a very long time because you don't go often around just going through your whole entire life in the military.
Yeah.
So
well, that's part of why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Is so that well now a piece of your legacy is out there.
Yeah. How exciting is that?
The internet is forever.
I mean, I'm sorry it had to be us, of course.
Yeah, who knows what'll happen next. So we'll see. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and you were passing through town, so I'm glad we were able to make this work.
This
So
is
thank you so
very
much.
fortuitous occasion. So
Well, before we wrap it up, let me ask you, because you've been out for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
What lessons of discipline, leadership, whatever the lesson may be, have you applied most in your post-military career?
I let the people that are good at what they do what they do. Like, we always want to correct. Like, now, like, you build your team based on their strengths and their weaknesses are something that everybody can learn, right? So, like, those are the things in between that we're learning from each other. But I enjoy letting people do what they're good at, because that makes them want to do it better, and they want to be good at it. They want to share it. It builds a really good team if you just let people do what they do.
Just get out of the way.
Yeah, just get out of the way and let them do it.
Capitalize on their strengths.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just their weaknesses are very much learning points, right? Like it's a learning spot for all of us.
Weakness is not a failure in many regards, but it is a learning point.
Yeah, it's a very good learning point. So yeah, I think that's what I've taken from the military. SOF specifically, they've ironed it out. They're like, yeah, you build a team around their strengths and their weaknesses. It's a learning objective for everybody, and then you can just pass that on, right? So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome.
Well said. That's a good thing to close on. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, that was a great interview. What do you think?
It was. She talked about how when she was a little kid, hearing the stories of her uncle and her grandfather's, adventures all over, and she would always have them telling stories of the places that they've been, and she would dig into the National Geographic magazines, which my grandmother did the same thing.
Yeah, same.
And then she got to live it out. She knew from a young age, like, that's what she was going to do. And then she did it.
Yeah.
She went and made a whole career out of it and started very, very early on into her career. I mean, not just because 9/11 happened like a couple of months after she was, done and at her first duty station, but I mean, she was constantly on the go.
Yeah. She said she joined because she wanted to. She mentioned her high school yearbook, right? She wanted to be a photographer, I believe is what she said, but she wanted to see the world and just do really cool stuff. She ended up getting to do that, not necessarily in the way that she would have forecasted, but being a topographical analyst with the U.S. Army engineers, you get to do a lot of those things. You are spending vast amounts of time looking at imagery. Sometimes you're taking pictures. You are the one that is creating the imagery for the trigger pullers and the analysts and everybody else to make
all the logisticians and route planners and
very important decisions that are going to drive maneuver, and even sometimes even higher than that at the national strategic level. The decisions are getting made. So
it was very cool. Very cool.
And again, another multi-generational military family.
Which we have talked about many, many times. But still very cool. She got to go a lot of cool places repeatedly. I mean, she went back to Bangladesh several times. I mean, she went to Honduras. She was in Kuwait, and Qatar, and Iraq.
Indonesia.
Indonesia, yeah. Singapore. I mean, all over. So she definitely accomplished that objective.
So she came into the Civil Affairs Regiment very shortly after, we call it the Great Divorce. It's a very dramatic term, but when the active duty civil affairs was created and the branch of civil affairs and psychological operations were created, whereas before they had been part of a larger reserve command and they'd been functional areas, which we won't get into all that. So she came in very shortly after that happened. So she's what we would call a plank holder within the 96th and the 95th Civil Affairs Battalion and Brigades. So really cool to be able to sit down and listen to her talk about her experiences doing that. She was a lot of firsts. She said she was the first female NCO in her battalion, which is the same battalion I was in a couple of years before I got there. Very cool. I like how she was able to tie her topographic analyst skills that she had acquired in her first couple of years fast forward to when she's working in an embassy with a country team. So it's going to be a very, very mixed group of, State Department people, Department of Justice, Department of this, that, the other thing. It's a whole hodgepodge, and every U.S. country team is going to be different, usually in an embassy, and how she was able to provide a lot of value to that team because of skills that she had acquired in her previous MOS many, many years prior, which is, again, another thing that it's not exclusive to special operations, but I think it's something unique that we provide to the fight, is that everybody has kind of a different background and we get mixed into this, kind of the melting pot analogy, right? So very cool.
I really appreciated her perspective about going to some place and really immersing yourself in the language, the culture, everything, all your surroundings, everything that a country has to offer, and really absorbing it, processing it, and being able to not fully understand, obviously, because that's not your home, that's not where you're from, but better understand the people that you're then there, assisting. Because a lot of people don't have that perspective. And she went through it with a very positive attitude, a desire to learn, a desire to understand.
Yeah.
And not from a haughty or conceited or arrogant perspective, I guess, but from a genuine desire to know better, to know more and know better, and that was refreshing.
Well, the thirst for knowledge. That's how we grow, and if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So, really, really great attributes to have in a serviceman or servicewoman is to have that ambition and that drive to be able to better yourself without having to be poked and prodded into doing it.
Yeah.
So, hence her successful career as a non-commissioned officer. So,
yeah,
very well done. So,
she was impressive.
Any parting shots on Miss Ivy?
Nope.
Okay. You know what's coming next.
It's the free fire.
It's the free fire area.
Bring it on.
Okay. There is a difference between your favorite something and the best something. Most critics, I think, are morons, so we'll set that on the side, and we're going to talk about our personal preferences, okay? What is your favorite? And you can define this kind of loosely however you want. Sports movie or sports-related movie. So kind of a wide berth there.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to go with Any Given Sunday because I watch that at the beginning of every football season, and I love it for a variety of reasons. It had some tremendous actors. I do love the older legend Dennis Quaid trying to mentor and teach the young whippersnapper who's coming up behind him, who doesn't want to learn anything, and Jamie Foxx. I liked their balance, but I liked that it also had a lot of great football players, either playing players or coaches.
Yeah, sure. And Al Pacino as himself.
Yes, well, Al Pacino only knows one way to...
Al Pacino as Al Pacino.
Yes. So I'm going to go with that, but there's a lot of other great sports movies.
Well, give me two runners up then.
Oh, okay. I don't care what anybody says. Field of Dreams it's an okay movie. It is not the be all end all. Rest in peace, Ray Liotta.
If you build it,
Yeah, it's a good movie.
For what it is,
probably a 7 out of 10 for me.
Okay.
It is not an emotional, tear-jerking epic. So that's obviously not a follow-up. Happy Gilmore follows 2 sports.
I will allow it.
It follows 2 sports, and it will always make me laugh. It will always make me laugh.
For what it is still a
Yes.
classic,
That is
perfect 90s comedy.
It is. It is definitely a runner-up. Christopher McDonald was amazing. He is hilarious.
He plays himself in every movie too.
And I mean, it doesn't matter like what role he's in. He was really good in Boardwalk Empire. I don't know if you ever saw that. He plays like the scummy political advisor.
He plays a jerk in every movie he's in, and he does it well.
But he was really good in that. But even when I was watching that, I mean, that was like 20 years after Happy Gilmore, and I still saw Shooter McGavin. I mean,
You can't unsee it.
yes, you can't. But yeah, that would definitely be runner-up number 1, also because it covers 2 sports, hockey and golf. And what was the one was it one of the Savage kids who like breaks his arm and then is able to throw super fast?
I think you're talking about Rookie of the Year.
Or The Rookie, was that it?
Rookie of the Year. No, not The Rookie. It's Rookie of the Year. I think it was not one of the Savage boys,
No?
but he's a kid and he breaks his arm and he becomes a major league pitcher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to say it's Rookie of the Year. You
Well,
can fact check us on that.
But I've always enjoyed that one. I haven't watched it in quite some time, but I always enjoyed it, especially towards the end. It's like his last game and his arm is gone. You know, he can't throw fast anymore. And the team that had pretty much resented him throughout, the movie, really comes together to help him get out of there and save face. So.
Another good early 90s movie. Okay. Very good.
Oh, and Major League.
I was wondering when that was going to come up.
Well, I already had one comedy in there, so yeah. Major League is good. Major League 2 is not.
Is it up there with Die Hard 2?
No, Die Hard 2 is far superior to Major League 2.
Oh, man.
Major League 2 is a movie that should have never been made. Die Hard 2 should have been made. But
Differently.
Differently. I mean, how can you do that to Reginald Val Johnson?
Poor Reginald.
Naked Tai Chi on a... Anyway,
That is water under the bridge, my friend.
This is not about that. So, anyway, your favorite sports-themed film.
So I have my number 1, but I'm going to build to it with I'll do my honorable mentions first, and then so honorable mentions, Miracle.
Yes.
So the Miracle on Ice.
Very good.
Do you believe in miracles?
Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah.
Excellent. So for what it is, very historically based. I know that there's probably dorks out there that will quibble over the historiosity of every little thing, but by and large, it's accurate, and it captures a very important moment in the Cold War, right?
It's the message and the mood that's most important.
Correct.
And Kurt Russell's hair.
And Kurt Russell has a mullet in that movie, so yes, it's magnificent. So you said Happy Gilmore, but that's a great one. Caddyshack, overrated. There's going to be some furious boomers out there, but
Caddyshack is a good movie. It is a solid 7.5. It is funny. There's a lot of great comedians in that movie, and they make a good eclectic cast, trying to make way too many storylines work. Yes.
We've already beat up on Mighty Ducks 2 in a previous Quack. Yes.
You really hate Emilio Estevez, don't you?
Emilio. Not one of my honorable mentions. So does Mortal Kombat count as a sports movie? I mean,
I suppose it could. We're going to go ahead and say no.
Okay.
In the same vein that Street Fighter doesn't count. Because, yes, mixed martial arts is a thing now. It wasn't really then. Plus, they are based on video games.
So does Bloodsport count?
Bloodsport does count.
Okay.
Because,
that is
again,
not my honorable
based on
mention.
a true story.
Not my honorable mention.
Kumite.
My second honorable mention, I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. I had Miracle. I think for a second we'll do Rudy. Just
Really?
yeah. I mean, I'm a little sentimental about that.
You think that Caddyshack is overrated, but Rudy is your runner-up?
Sure. I'm desperate for you.
I'm really going to get blasted because I just trashed Field of Dreams and now I'm trashing Rudy.
I'm not saying Rudy is my favorite movie. I'm saying it's a runner-up.
It is your first runner-up. I mean, it's your silver medalist.
All right, we're going to jump to the end here. My favorite sports movie is definitely Remember the Titans. That's unequivocal.
Mm-hmm.
Denzel's a national treasure.
It is. That is a fantastic.
Great casting. I mean, the screenplay is great. The piece of history that it captures, I think, and there are still people alive who lived through that.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's that. The speech that Denzel gives in the cemetery at Gettysburg just kills me every single time. And I love the montage followed by when the boys get off the bus back after the football camp. Great piece of cinema, great story, great acting, great everything. So Remember the Titans.
I have nothing bad to say about
Fair
Remember
enough.
the Titans.
Fair enough.
It was an excellent movie, and you're right. Denzel is a national treasure, and the soundtrack was awesome too.
Yes, not as far as I know, that was not an original soundtrack, but yes, it was all great tunes from that era. Well done, chef's kiss. So, any parting shots on the Free Fire area?
Mighty Ducks 2, Goon 2, Caddyshack 2,
Major League 2.
Major League 2. If you have a great sports movie,
Don't make it again.
don't make it again. I'm probably leaving.
I think
some off.
the only exception to that was Longest Yard, I think, which was a remake, not a sequel.
Yeah, it was
so,
a remake, not a sequel, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the secret, is make a great sports movie and leave it alone. Don't do the shameless cash grab and try to make a sequel, because it'll suck. There's only ever really been one great sequel in cinematic history,
and that was Empire Strikes Back.
And that was Empire Strikes
Yes,
Back.
and I think we're good on that. All right. So, as we start to, if you're still watching at this point, you must either be an invalid in a hospital bed or you're not taking your meds. So, or both.
They can't be friends and family.
You probably are just friends and family at this point. We love you all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We're on all the podcast channels. We're on YouTube and Rumble. So however you want to imbibe whatever this is, we appreciate you being out there. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a good review. Do anything you can do to help us drive the algorithm. It makes the show climb and it gets the word out even better. So anything you can do, we appreciate.
Yes.
Give our website at tracerburnout.com. Give us a look. We've got a lot of good stuff there on the website, and then any other support you can give us, we appreciate.
That's right. And remember, your service matters.